They thought he was just another delivery man, invisible, insignificant. But when the truth about his identity was revealed, their world turned upside down. What really happened that day at Solera Bistro? The answer will leave you stunned. The sun dipped low over the city of Crestfield, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson. The streets, lined with bustling cafes and sleek office buildings, pulsed with the rhythm of a weekday afternoon. Among the crowd, Daniel Carter maneuvered a handcart stacked with neatly packed boxes toward the rear entrance of Solera Bistro, one of the most renowned restaurants in town. Daniel's uniform, a simple grey polo and cargo pants, clung to his frame, damp with sweat from the late summer heat. He'd made hundreds of deliveries before, yet something about today felt different. Perhaps it was the subtle tightening in his chest, or the sharp laughter echoing from the kitchen as he approached the back door. Knock, knock. The door opened with a metallic groan. A young man in a pristine chef's jacket stood there, eyes narrowing as he looked Daniel up and down. Behind him, 2 more staff members peeked over his shoulder, smirking. "You're late," the chef snapped. Daniel glanced at his watch. "I'm exactly on time, sir. Fresh produce and seafood as requested." The chef scoffed. Sure, just bring it in. Try not to scratch the walls." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he nodded, pushing the handcart into the bustling kitchen. The air inside was thick with the aroma of garlic, rosemary, and simmering broth. Yet, beneath that warmth, lurked something colder, the unmistakable weight of judgment. As Daniel carefully unloaded the first crate, he heard it. "Did the delivery company run out of professionals?" One voice murmured. "Probably hired him last minute," another added, laughter bubbling beneath the words. Daniel kept his focus on the boxes. Years of experience had taught him that dignity lay in restraint. But as he turned to retrieve the second load, his gaze flicked toward the elegant dining area visible through the glass partition. Chandeliers glimmered overhead, and the polished hardwood floor gleamed under the soft light. Guests here came for the exquisite food and the exclusivity. It was exactly why Daniel had chosen this restaurant for today's delivery. He pushed the empty cart back toward the door when a sous chef called out, "Hey, delivery guy!" "You forgot a box." Daniel hesitated. He was certain he hadn't. Still, he turned back and bent down, only to find an empty crate. Laughter erupted from the staff. "Relax, man," the sous chef said, grinning. "Just messing with you." Daniel straightened, meeting the man's eyes. He said nothing, but his silence spoke louder than any retort could. As he turned to leave, another voice, softer but sharp, sliced through the air. "Guys like that don't belong in places like this." Daniel paused at the door, hand tightening on the handle. The room grew quiet. Slowly he turned back, his eyes sweeping across the room. "I'm here delivering the ingredients that keep this place running," Daniel said, voice calm but firm. "The next time you look down on someone doing honest work, remember that." He left without another word, but they hadn't seen the last of him. The door to Solera Bistro swung shut behind Daniel Carter, but the sting of their laughter lingered in the warm evening air. He stood for a moment, breathing deeply, eyes fixed on the golden letters above the restaurant's grand facade. Solera Bistro, a culinary experience like no other. A bitter smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Experience indeed. He'd just experienced firsthand the rot beneath the restaurant's polished surface. Daniel climbed into his delivery van, pulled out his phone, and scrolled through his calendar. A single event glowed at 5 p.m. Staff meeting. Solera Bistro. He tapped the screen, sighed, and set the phone aside. He'd seen what he needed to see. The curtain had lifted, revealing the unchecked arrogance simmering behind the kitchen doors. And in less than an hour the staff would learn who he really was. Inside Solera Bistro, the staff bustled to finish their prep work. The lunch rush had ended, and the dinner service loomed just hours away. Chef Logan Grant paced near the pass-through window, barking orders to the kitchen crew. His tall frame moved with practiced authority, though the glint in his eyes often teetered toward condescension. "Can someone explain why the basil looks like it came from a discount grocery store?" Logan barked, holding up a bunch of perfectly fine basil. "It's fresh, chef," the line cook stammered. Logan tossed the herbs into the bin with a scoff. If the guests wanted fresh, they'd eat at home. Here, they pay for perfection. Nearby, the two waiters who had mocked Daniel earlier folded napkins and exchanged grins. "Did you see delivery guy's face when he found the empty crate?" One whispered. The other chuckled. "Classic. I bet he's used to that, though. Guys like him? No ambition." The kitchen manager, Claudia Rivera, entered the room, clipboard in hand. Her brows knit together. "Okay, listen up," she called out, voice cutting through the chatter. "The new owner's coming in for a staff meeting at 5. Everyone needs to be in the main dining area. No exceptions." "The new owner?" Logan echoed, frowning. "I thought Mr. Callahan was still running the place." Claudia shook her head. The sale went through last month. The new owner has been observing operations." "Observing?" Logan muttered, a prickle of unease running down his spine. "What the hell does that mean?" By 4:55 p.m., the staff gathered in the opulent dining room. Servers, cooks, dishwashers, and managers lined up along the marble floor, whispering speculation. "You think it's some rich investor?" one asked. "Probably. Some suit who's never touched a cutting board," another replied. Chef Logan stood near the center, arms crossed, radiating impatience. "Let's get this over with," he muttered. "We've got service in 2 hours." The room grew quiet when the double doors opened. Daniel Carter walked in. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several staff members exchanged confused glances. "It's the delivery guy," someone whispered. "What the hell is he doing here?" Logan muttered, voice tight. Daniel reached the center of the room and turned to face them. His uniform was still slightly dusty from the delivery. His eyes, however, were sharp and clear. "Good afternoon," Daniel said. "Thank you for being here. I won't take much of your time." He paused, scanning the crowd. "My name is Daniel Carter, and as of last month, I'm the new owner of Solera Bistro." The words landed like a thunderclap. Eyes widened. Mouths dropped open. One of the waiters who'd mocked Daniel earlier nearly dropped the silver tray he held. Logan's face turned ashen. You're joking," he blurted. Daniel's expression remained unchanged. "No, Chef Grant, I'm not." The silence stretched, taut as a wire. "I chose not to announce myself immediately," Daniel continued. "Instead, I wanted to see the culture of this restaurant firsthand. To see how the team operates when no one is watching." He let his words settle before adding, "This morning, I got my answer." Logan shifted his weight uncomfortably. Claudia Rivera's eyes flicked toward the floor. Daniel's gaze swept across the room. "I saw hard-working staff doing their best in a fast-paced environment. But I also saw something else. Condescension, cruelty, and a lack of respect. Not toward guests. Toward each other." The two waiters who had mocked Daniel earlier turned crimson. Logan's jaw tightened. "This restaurant was founded on excellence," Daniel said. "But true excellence isn't just about perfect dishes or polished wine glasses. It's about how we treat every person who walks through these doors. Guests, staff, and yes, even delivery drivers." He turned slightly, meeting Logan's stare. "Because if we can't master that, we don't deserve to serve anyone." The dining room of Solera Bistro stood in tense, stunned silence. The chandeliers cast golden patterns across the marble floors, but the warmth of the room couldn't soften the icy discomfort that now permeated the space. Daniel Carter remained at the center of it all, his presence no longer that of an unnoticed delivery worker, but of a leader unafraid to confront the truth. Chef Logan Grant's voice broke the silence. This is ridiculous," he scoffed, folding his arms. "You're telling me the guy who just delivered our seafood runs this place?" Daniel's gaze shifted to Logan, calm but unyielding. "Yes, Chef Grant. That's exactly what I'm saying. A ripple of nervous laughter fluttered through the room, more out of disbelief than amusement. Daniel let it pass. He had expected skepticism. In fact, he'd counted on it. Logan shook his head, the corner of his mouth curling into a sneer. With all due respect, Mr. Carter, or should I say delivery guy, you don't know the first thing about running a restaurant like this. It takes more than hauling fish and stacking boxes. The jab hit its mark, but Daniel didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward, closing the space between them. The air seemed to thin as he spoke. You're right, Logan. Running a restaurant takes more than hauling fish. It takes leadership, it takes humility, and it takes a team that trusts one another, not one that tears each other down with every sarcastic remark or dismissive glare. Logan's smirk wavered. Daniel turned, addressing the staff. I know what it's like to start at the bottom. My first job was washing dishes in a small diner when I was 16. I didn't have the right shoes or the right connections, but I had heart. And I worked my way up, from the dish pit to the kitchen, to management, and now to here. His voice softened but never lost its edge. I've scrubbed floors, prepped meals, served tables, and yes, made deliveries. I know what it means to do hard, honest work. What I saw today wasn't hard work. It was arrogance. The room shifted uncomfortably. The servers who had mocked him earlier shrank toward the back. The sous chef who'd tricked him with the empty box stared at the floor. Daniel let the silence linger before continuing. But here's the thing. We can fix this, if we choose to. He gestured toward the gleaming kitchen visible through the glass partition. This restaurant has potential, incredible potential, but only if we build it on a foundation of mutual respect, for each other, for our craft, and for every person who steps through those doors. He paused, then added, because if we don't, this place will be nothing more than a hollow display of expensive plates and empty egos. Chef Logan shifted his stance. And what if some of us don't agree with your vision? Daniel met his gaze, voice measured. Then this isn't the right kitchen for you. A sharp intake of breath passed through the room. Logan's eyes hardened. You don't get it, do you? I'm the one who made this restaurant what it is today. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What you made, Chef Grant, is a hostile environment, and I won't tolerate it. Logan's face flushed red. You're making a mistake. No, Daniel replied softly. I'm making a change. The tension snapped as Logan yanked off his apron, threw it on the counter, and stormed toward the door. Before exiting, he turned and glared at Daniel. Good luck running this place without me. The door slammed behind him. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The silence was heavier now. Daniel exhaled slowly, then turned back to the staff. For those of you who are still here, he said, we start fresh tomorrow morning. Same time, same place, different attitude. He walked toward the door but stopped before leaving. Remember, every person matters here. If you can't get behind that, don't come back. With that, he left the dining room. The staff remained frozen in place. Some exchanged uncertain glances. Others stood still, processing the shift in power. Claudia Rivera, the kitchen manager, broke the silence. All right, she said, voice shaky but determined. See you all tomorrow. Outside, Daniel stood beside his van, the cool evening air a stark contrast to the tension he'd just left behind. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He answered without checking the ID. Mr. Carter? It was Mark Callahan, the restaurant's former owner. Yes, Mark. Just saw the news. Seems like you made quite an entrance. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't plan for things to go down like that. Maybe not, Mark said. But sometimes kitchens need a good fire to burn off the grease. Daniel chuckled. Yeah, let's hope the fire didn't scare off the whole team. Give them time. The right ones will stay. Daniel ended the call and pocketed his phone. the weight of responsibility pressed against his chest. He glanced back at the bistro's elegant windows. Behind that glass stood a team now forced to reckon with their assumptions. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The morning air over Crestfield carried a crisp edge as Daniel Carter arrived at Solera Bistro before dawn. The sky was still dark, the streets nearly empty. He stood for a moment beside his van, staring at the restaurant's familiar facade. The gold lettering above the entrance glimmered faintly under the streetlights. Solera Bistro, a culinary experience like no other. Daniel tightened his jacket against the cold. Time to make that slogan mean something, he thought. Inside, the kitchen was silent. The polished counters, usually a blur of activity, lay untouched. He walked past the stove, trailing his fingers along the cool metal surface. His mind churned through the plans for the day. New protocols, a meeting with the supplier, and most importantly, addressing the toxic culture he'd witnessed firsthand. At exactly 6:58 a.m., the back door creaked open. Claudia Rivera entered first, hair pulled into a tight bun, clipboard tucked under one arm. She hesitated when she saw Daniel. "Morning, Mr. Carter," she greeted. "Morning, Claudia," Daniel replied with a nod. By 7:15, more staff trickled in. The sous chef who'd planted the empty crate came in with his head down. The two servers who'd mocked Daniel hovered near the pastry station, avoiding his gaze. One by one they filed in, uncertain and subdued. By 7:30, Daniel stood before them. "You're all here," he said, breaking the silence. "That's a good start." No one spoke. Daniel placed a small notepad on the stainless steel prep table. "Today marks day one of the new Solera Bistro. We're going to start with a clean slate, but that doesn't mean forgetting yesterday. What happened yesterday was ugly. It exposed cracks in how we treat one another." He let the statement linger before adding, "Fixing it will take more than words. It'll take action." The staff shifted uncomfortably. Daniel noticed the two servers exchanging anxious glances. "So here's the plan," Daniel continued. "Effective immediately, we're implementing the following." He held up a finger. 1. Mutual respect. If you can't speak to someone the same way you'd speak to a guest, you don't speak at all. Another finger. 2. Training. Every employee will attend a hospitality workshop. Respect and empathy aren't optional, they're part of the job. A third finger. 3. Accountability. If you witness unprofessional behavior and stay silent, you become part of the problem. I'll be establishing an anonymous reporting system. Use it. Daniel leaned on the table. Those are the new standards. If anyone feels they can't live up to them, the door's right there. Silence. Then, Claudia Rivera raised her hand slightly. What happens if someone doesn't follow through? Daniel's jaw tightened. Then they won't work here. No exceptions. The staff exchanged glances. The sous chef who'd embarrassed Daniel with the empty crate cleared his throat. About yesterday. I was just joking around. I didn't mean anything by it." Daniel's gaze locked on him. "Jokes that make someone feel small have no place here. If you want to stay, you'll need to understand that." The sous chef swallowed hard and gave a small nod. Daniel straightened. "Right, let's get to work." The hours passed with a tense but noticeable shift. Orders were prepped with quiet concentration. The usual undercurrent of gossip was absent. Daniel observed from the edge of the kitchen, mentally noting interactions. Progress was slow but visible. That afternoon, Claudia approached him as he inspected the wine inventory. "I've been in this kitchen for 5 years," she said softly. "I've never seen Chef Grant treat anyone with real respect, just fear." Daniel capped the wine bottle. "Fear's easy. Respect takes work." Claudia hesitated. "I think some of the staff are scared things will go back to the way they were. That when the pressure hits during dinner rush, the old habits will come back." Daniel considered her words. "Then we show them they won't." Dinner service that night began smoothly, tables filled with couples, families, and business partners. The aroma of seared steak and rosemary wafted through the dining area. Daniel stood near the host station, observing. Near the dessert station, a waiter spilled a tray of crème brûlée. Plates shattered. The kitchen froze, eyes darting toward the commotion. Daniel saw it. The creeping smirks, the instinctive judgment in some faces. He moved before the first word of ridicule could form. Grabbing a mop and crouching beside the waiter, Daniel spoke clearly enough for the entire staff to hear. "Accidents happen," he said, sweeping the shards into a dustpan. "What matters is how we respond. Let's get this cleaned up and move on." The tension dissolved. Another waiter knelt to help. The smirks disappeared. The mood shifted. By the end of the night, Daniel felt the crackling energy of change. It wasn't dramatic, but it was there, a flicker of understanding. Later, Daniel sat alone in his office, the hum of the kitchen's cooling fans a soothing backdrop. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. "You're wasting your time. People don't change. Neither will this place." Daniel stared at the message, heart thudding. He didn't recognize the number. He powered off his phone and leaned back in his chair. People could change. He had to believe that. But whoever had sent that message was still lurking in the shadows. The digital clock on Daniel Carter's desk glowed 2:13 a.m. when his eyes finally closed. The day's exhaustion weighed on his chest like a concrete block, but the message still haunted him. "You're wasting your time. People don't change. Neither will this place." His mind swirled with questions. Was it a disgruntled employee? A former staff member with ties to Logan Grant? Or simply someone testing his resolve? The buzz of his phone jolted him awake. Another message, from the same unknown number. Unknown. "You might wear the suit now, but you're still just a delivery boy." Daniel's fingers tightened around the phone. The insult didn't sting. He was proud of his roots. What unnerved him was the intent behind it. This wasn't just resistance. It was sabotage. By 6 a.m., Daniel stood in the middle of the empty dining room, running his hands over the polished mahogany tables. The space was silent now, but at dinner, it transformed into a stage. Guests came seeking culinary perfection. The staff performed with practiced efficiency. But beneath the surface, something darker festered. Claudia Rivera arrived early, as always, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Daniel without a word. "You're a mind reader," Daniel said, taking a grateful sip. "You look like you slept about 10 minutes, Claudia replied. "Something wrong?" He showed her the messages. Her lips thinned as she read. "Whoever sent this knows the restaurant," she said. "They're trying to rattle you." "It's working," Daniel admitted. "But it also tells me we're doing something right." "Someone wants to keep things the way they were," Claudia said. "Chef Grant built his empire on fear and division. A lot of people benefited from that." Daniel exhaled. "The question is, who?" The morning shift passed without incident. Prep stations buzzed with activity, but Daniel noticed the lingering tension. Conversations were quieter, glances more cautious. The text messages weren't just targeting him, they were sending a message to the whole team. By midday, Daniel called an impromptu staff meeting. The kitchen staff gathered near the walk-in freezer. The familiar hum of appliances underscored the conversation. "I need everyone's attention," Daniel began. "I received anonymous messages last night. Someone's trying to undermine the work we're doing here." A ripple of discomfort spread through the group. "The message said that people don't change," Daniel continued. "That Solera Bistro won't change. I disagree." He scanned the room, meeting each gaze. "But I need all of you with me. If you see something suspicious, hear something concerning, tell me. This isn't about punishment. It's about protecting the integrity of what we're building." The staff exchanged uneasy looks. Daniel didn't miss the way the sous chef, Matt, avoided eye contact. "Dismissed," Daniel said after a moment. "Let's get back to work." As the group dispersed, Claudia leaned close. "Did you see Matt?" she whispered. I did, Daniel replied. That afternoon, Daniel reviewed the restaurant's security footage from the previous night. His office smelled faintly of roasted garlic and freshly baked bread, the kitchen's comforting scents infiltrating even the most stressful moments. He fast-forwarded through hours of mundane footage, empty tables, cleaning staff, the delivery truck departure, nothing unusual. Until 1:42 a.m. The camera near the rear entrance captured a figure slipping through the back door. The footage was grainy, but the person's build was familiar. Matt, Daniel muttered. The sous chef had no reason to be there after hours. Daniel rewound the footage, watching the figure reach into their pocket, retrieve a phone, and type something. Moments later, Daniel's phone buzzed in the video, the exact time he received the threatening message. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the restaurant early. He positioned himself near the prep station as the staff trickled in. Matt entered carrying a worn backpack. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Daniel. "Morning, Matt," Daniel said casually. "Morning, Mr. Carter," Matt replied, voice tight. "Got a minute?" Matt hesitated, then nodded. Daniel gestured toward his office. The walk across the kitchen was silent. Inside, Daniel closed the door, leaning against his desk. "I reviewed last night's security footage," Daniel began. Matt's throat bobbed with a nervous swallow. I don't know what you mean." Daniel crossed his arms. "I saw you near the back entrance. You sent the messages, didn't you?" Matt's facade cracked. "It wasn't personal," he said quickly. "I swear. Logan told me to." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Logan Grant." Matt nodded, words tumbling out. "He said you'd ruin the place, that you didn't belong. He told me to send those messages to stir up doubt." Daniel's pulse raced. "Is Logan planning something else?" Matt hesitated. "He said he wasn't done, that Solera was his restaurant and he'd get it back, one way or another." Daniel straightened, heart hammering. Logan Grant wasn't just bitter. He was planning something bigger. That night, Daniel parked his van across the street from the restaurant and waited. Midnight came and went. The streets emptied. At 2:03 a.m., headlights appeared at the end of the block. A black sedan glided to a stop behind the restaurant. Logan Grant stepped out. Daniel gripped the steering wheel. The former chef carried a crowbar in one hand and a gasoline canister in the other. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. This wasn't sabotage. It was arson. Daniel Carter's heart pounded as he watched Logan Grant stalk toward the back entrance of Solera Bistro, crowbar in one hand, gasoline canister in the other. The dim glow of the streetlight cast shadows across the chef's face, highlighting his twisted determination. Daniel's instincts screamed at him to act. His fingers hovered over his phone. 911 or Claudia? He chose both. "Daniel," to Claudia. "Logan's here." Back door. Gasoline. Then he dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? "This is Daniel Carter, owner of Solera Bistro. There's an intruder at my restaurant, armed with gasoline. I believe he's planning arson. I'm on site, parked across the street." "Stay on the line, sir. Officers are en route." Daniel set the phone to speaker mode, opened his glove compartment, and retrieved a heavy flashlight. "Stay calm. Stay smart," he told himself. Across the street, Logan pried the back door open with a sharp crack of metal on metal. The lock gave way, and the chef disappeared into the darkness. Daniel slipped out of his van and crossed the street, footsteps light on the asphalt. From inside, the sound of liquid splashing echoed faintly. Gasoline. Logan was serious. The kitchen lights were off, but the faint beam of Logan's flashlight flickered against the stainless steel counters. Daniel followed the smell of fuel toward the walk-in fridge. He crouched behind the prep station as Logan's silhouette came into view. The chef stood in the middle of the kitchen, pouring gasoline in a wide arc across the floor. He's not just trying to scare me, Daniel realized. He wants to destroy the entire restaurant. Logan paused to light a rag stuffed into the canister's spout. Daniel couldn't wait any longer. "Logan!" his voice rang out. Logan spun around, startled. The lighter sparked, unlit. His eyes widened when he saw Daniel. Then his lips twisted into a sneer. Should have stayed home, Carter. Daniel tightened his grip on the flashlight. What the hell are you doing? What I should have done weeks ago, Logan growled. This place is mine. I built it. You don't deserve it. You built fear. I'm building respect, Daniel shot back. Logan's thumb flicked the lighter again. Click, click. Daniel's mind raced. You worked here for years, he said, trying to stall. Why burn it down? Because if I can't have it, Logan said, eyes gleaming, nobody will. The lighter sparked. A small flame danced to life. Daniel launched the flashlight. The metal cylinder hurtled through the air and struck Logan's wrist. The lighter fell to the floor, clattering across the tiles. The flame licked a gasoline trail, igniting a thin, creeping line of fire. Logan cursed and lunged for the door. Daniel sprinted after him. The fire spread quickly along the slick surface. Smoke thickened the air as flames climbed the walls. Logan slammed through the back exit, but Daniel was faster. He tackled the chef onto the wet pavement outside. Get off me, Logan snarled, thrashing. Daniel pinned Logan's arms. It's over, Daniel hissed. You tried to destroy everything. But you're the only one who'll lose tonight. Sirens wailed in the distance. Logan's eyes widened as blue and red lights bathed the alley in color. Police cruisers screeched to a stop, followed by a fire engine. Hands where we can see them, an officer barked, weapon drawn. Daniel released Logan and raised his hands. Logan scrambled to his knees, but the officers tackled him to the ground. Handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Mr. Carter? A voice called. Daniel turned. Claudia Rivera stood near the street, eyes wide, phone in hand. I called when you texted, she said, voice shaking. Good, Daniel replied, coughing through the smoke. You probably just saved the restaurant. By dawn, the flames were extinguished. The kitchen bore scorch marks along the walls, and the acrid scent of smoke clung to the air. Daniel sat on the curb, forearms resting on his knees. His clothes were damp with sweat and soot. Lieutenant Bryce of the Crestfield Police Department knelt beside him. We've got Logan Grant in custody. Charges include attempted arson, breaking and entering, and endangering public safety. Did he say why? Daniel asked. Bryce exhaled. Claims you stole the restaurant from him. Daniel shook his head. I bought it legally. He just didn't like the change. Bryce stood. Well, he's done now. The next evening, Daniel called an all-staff meeting. The kitchen smelled of cleaning chemicals, but the damage was minimal. The scars of the fire, however, ran deeper than the walls. Yesterday, Daniel began, standing where Logan had tried to set the fire, someone tried to destroy what we're building. The staff listened intently. But fire doesn't just destroy, Daniel continued. It reveals. It shows us what's strong enough to withstand the heat. He swept his gaze across the room. This team survived, and now together we rebuild, not just the kitchen, but the culture. He lifted a small plaque from the counter. The inscription read, Respect is the foundation of every great meal. Starting today, this becomes our core value, Daniel declared. Every decision, every action, every interaction, we lead with respect. The team nodded. Even the sous chef who had once mocked Daniel stood a little straighter. A month later, Solera Bistro reopened with a new mission. The grand opening saw guests of all backgrounds welcomed with genuine warmth. And as Daniel stood at the host stand that night, a young delivery driver approached with a cart of fresh seafood. The driver shifted nervously, eyes darting toward the bustling kitchen. Daniel stepped forward, smiled, and extended his hand. Thanks for your hard work, he said. Come in. Let me show you where to unload. The driver's face lit up with surprise. Daniel turned back to his bustling restaurant, heart swelling with quiet pride. Respect isn't given, it's shown. And that night, Solera Bistro wasn't just serving meals, it was serving a new legacy. If this story surprised you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your friends, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned for more incredible tales that reveal the power of resilience and respect.